Recently, I decked out my XR150 in a bunch of TST parts, including their controversial fender delete, and today we're going to talk about all of it so that you can decide for yourself if it's worth it or not. Now, I'm sure you're asking yourself, how can a fender delete be controversial? And in this case, it's because in order to install the fender delete, you actually have to hack up an OEM part of the bike that costs almost as much as the fender delete itself, making the fender delete irreversible and quite expensive if you mess up. But more on that later. Let's go to Past Tense Birch and check out all the parts that we put on this thing. All right, so here's everything that we have for the XR today. We have some flush mount LED turn signals for the front, plate light for the back to go along with the fender delete, and integrated tail light right there. These are some brackets for the fender delete. We have an LED light bulb for the front, a flasher relay to make sure that the LED lights flash at the right rate. This is really cool. This is actually a module for the rear tail light that'll make it flash when you hit the brakes to make people a little bit more aware of you. And then this right here is the harness that you need to hook that up. And then this thing is pretty interesting. It actually goes behind the headlight. Apparently with the XR, when you put LED lights on it, even with the flasher relay, once the lights are flashing at the correct rate, apparently something weird happens where all four of them flash at the same time, no matter what. So this apparently remedies that. Thanks for the rundown, Past Tense Birch. Now, if you guys are wondering why I didn't film an install video of any of this, and I'm only showing you after the fact, it's because TST Industries themselves actually offer in-depth install videos for every single part that they make. Okay, that and the fact that I tried out a fancy new reel camera and all of the audio got absolutely ruined, making none of the footage usable. And it does have these little... See, this is why I don't use fancy cameras. It just happens to work out really, really well that they also offer install videos. But to be honest, everything that I did, except for the fender delete, was so easy that I don't think an install video is needed at all. So let's start at the front and work our way back and talk about everything that we did. Okay, so up at the front, we got rid of the big old stock turn signals in favor of TST's flush mount smoked lens turn signals. I don't know how I said that first try. And while we were up here, we also went on Amazon and grabbed an LED headlight bulb and threw it in there. And while we had everything apart, we also installed TST's module behind here that eliminates the quad flash that happens when you do LEDs on this bike. This part was super simple. In order to get this off, there's just one bolt right here, one bolt right in there, and then it matches on the other side. There's some bullet connectors that you got to pop off to get the turn signals off. Then you just take off the turn signals with the nuts on the back of it, and then these new turn signals actually come with bullet connectors that just plug right in. No wiring, no soldering, nothing. And then while you're back there, that module that I was talking about just plugs right in line of the stock harness, and then you just pop out the OEM headlight bulb and put in the LED one. Dude, let's go! Yeah, don't look into that. Now, TST offers a handful of different LED turn signal options, and on the bike that they used for all of their testing and installs on their website, shout out Link for donating his bike for that.
My name's Link.
They use their sequential turn signals that are kind of more of a small stalk right here. And as cool as it is to have those sequential turn signals, I didn't want anything sticking out from the sides, especially because I knew that when we did this fender delete, the turn signals are built into this light, so that was going to get rid of any need for turn signals here. So if there's going to be nothing on the back, I didn't want stalks up at the front. And these are actually the exact same turn signals that I run on my Grom for the past several years, so I knew that they were good and cheap, so it was a no-brainer. Now, I originally put them in the stock turn signal spot right here, but the issue is that you couldn't see them flashing past the headlight cowl. They were just too flush mount, and you could see them from the side, but not the front. Fortunately, this headlight cowl actually has a hole right here in between the white and the black part of the headlight cowl. It comes like that from the factory as just kind of like a design element, but as it turns out, it's perfect for putting the turn signals right there. They fit perfect, they fit flush, and you can turn the bars both ways at full lock without them making contact with anything. Now, I kind of glazed over this module in there that I said is there to eliminate quad flash, and what I mean by that is that apparently because halogen bulbs come on this bike from the factory, a weird thing happens when you put in LEDs, and that is that no matter which side turn signal you turn on, all four of them flash at the same time, and that module somehow stops that from happening. I'm not sure how. Maybe it's sorcery, maybe it's magic, maybe they're just smarter than I am, but either way, it's easy and it works.
And electrical engineers decided to run both signal sides into one circuit. One side being the ground for the active and then vice versa when you activate the other one.
Then as we move towards the back end of the bike, we had to pop this panel off right here to get to the flasher relay. The flasher relay is right behind that panel and super easy to swap out. It has almost like a rubber boot around it that you slide off of a clip, unplug the old flasher relay, plug the new one in, and then reuse that rubber boot type thing to get it back on the clip. Super easy, plus this panel had to come off to do the fender delete anyway. And speaking of the fender delete, now it's time to talk about the controversial fender delete and my thoughts on it. Some people love it, some people hate the way that you have to do it, and I would say that I'm somewhere in the middle. Okay, so we already had that first side panel off, then we had to pop off the other side panel on the other side, had to take off the seat, take off the rear rack, and take off the rear white plastic, and that showed us everything we needed to see. The turn signals are on there with bullet connectors again, so you just pop those off and take the turn signals off. The tail light unplugs and it's 2 bolts to take that out, and now the controversy starts. And that is because in order to do this fender delete, you have to take the plastic of the big old stock fender and cut it with a box cutting knife.
Okay, wish me luck.
It does not come with a replacement plastic part. You have to actually continue running a box cutting knife around the bend of it until it cuts through.
Something tells me that this is not made for somebody as OCD as I am.
And then file down the rough edges with, they say, a file. I used a Dremel. And then run a lighter along it in order to get any of like the roughness off.
Just burn off and cinch off little frillies that are sticking out.
And that's where the controversy starts, because lots of people are saying, listen, if I'm spending this much money, I shouldn't have to hack up an OEM part. So let's just lay the facts out there. This fender delete costs about $135, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in order to do this fender delete, you also have to have that flasher relay and the module for up front, and the fender delete does not include this license plate light, just in case you want to use some of your own. So by the time you get the fender delete, the license plate light, the flasher relay, and the module, all of which are needed for this, it runs you about $185 plus tax. So $185 for something that you need to hack up your stock plastics is where lots of people aren't too pleased with it. And in TST's defense, they did say that this plastic part costs less than $50 off of a place like Partzilla. So if you mess up, it's only a $50 part to replace.
We will make a permanent modification to this component here on this bike, but should you ever decide that you want to go back to stock, that part costs less than $50 from a place like Partzilla or MR Cycle, so no worries there.
And they also said that from their point of view, in order to, 3D print or make some sort of panel instead of having to cut up the OEM, hypothetically speaking, it would add $10 to $12 of cost to the unit for them. And because this is such a budget-friendly bike, they didn't want to increase the price anymore.
This is a budget-friendly motorcycle.
Which I totally get. It's totally commendable. But this plastic part is indeed not under $50 like they said. This plastic part that you have to cut is actually about $120. The one that is less than $50 is the metal bracket that you have to remove right here. So when they said that, I believe they were looking at the parts diagram and thinking that this plastic part was included in that metal bracket and that was less than $50. But in reality, the metal bracket is by itself for less than $50. The plastic part is $120. So if you're spending $135 on the fender delete, if you mess up cutting it, the plastic replacement is $120. That's almost the cost of the fender delete. And my other playing devil's advocate for this is that they said that it adds $10 to $12 worth of cost, so they want to keep it budget friendly. And I get that, because $10 to $12 worth of cost to them probably translates to, let's say, $40 to the consumer. If I have to be so honest, if I'm already paying $185 for everything needed for this, I would gladly have spent $40 extra to not have to take the time to hack this up.
I don't like this. The finished product better be worth it.
Not to mention, if it's somebody who's not super confident in doing this, that $40 is well worth their, I guess, fear of messing it up and having it be irreversible. Because if you mess it up, not only are you spending $120 on another plastic piece, but then you have to redo the thing that you already messed up, so you're going into it already freaked out, if that makes sense. So while I get where they're coming from in the sense that this is a very budget-friendly bike, so they want to keep the cost down as much as possible, I think they also didn't quite grasp the fact that this is also a very beginner-friendly bike. So there could be a lot of people who are modifying this bike for the first time ever that are really intimidated by having to cut up a piece that actually costs $120 if they mess it up. But enough of the controversy of how it's done. Let's talk about the piece itself to talk about whether or not it's worth it. The finished product, in my opinion, looks absolutely great. Let's turn it on so you can check it out. Hopefully it's showing through the camera well, but it's a nice and bright tail light, and then it actually has the turn signals built into it, like I was saying. So when you turn on the turn signal, you can see it flashing from red to amber, and there's no need for any stock turn signals coming off the side. However, they do make it extremely easy if you want to do that. Not only does a tail light have bullet connectors, but it also has additional bullet connector wires coming off of it so that you can wire in turn signals at the same time as the tail light. So although I don't have turn signals, hypothetically, if you wanted to run the integrated tail light and additional turn signals here, it's the same concept as the front, where there's already wires with bullet connectors to just plug in the turn signal, so you don't have to think about wiring or, soldering or anything like that. It's just good to go. So I think that is really cool, but it comes with a big but. And that would be the fact that for me, I did not have a great time with the butt connectors on the back. What the is going on? The front butt connectors were great. I plugged them in, they worked first try, and obviously trial and error going from this spot to this spot. I had to plug in and unplug these turn signals probably 4 or 5 different times to get it to work, and they held strong every single time. On the back end, I plugged them in the first time to test them, and only one turn signal was working, and I was like, oh, that's a little weird. So I went to unplug the bullet connectors to check them, and both of them broke. The only 2 bullet connectors that I had to plug in, both of them broke on the first use. Dude, of course I wasn't recording. I was about to show you guys how this bullet connector just sheared off right there, and I went to pull out the other bullet connector that I had attached to show you guys, and it just stripped out of their bullet connector. Once I got home and looked at it, I could tell that it's just because they were crimped wrong, and that bullet connectors are supposed to be crimped kind of like a W to hold it in place, whereas these were just crimped kind of like an overlapping circle. So one of them ended up crushing the wire and cutting it, and the other one just didn't hold strong or properly, and it slid out. I did tell TST about this issue, and they reassured me that they would look into all the kits and make sure that it was proper going forward. So that's good, but it kind of sucks that the only 2 bullet connectors I had to use broke, and I ended up having to just solder them anyway. Shout out to the solder stick. And another thing that sucks about all of the wiring that goes on underneath here is that, like I said earlier, it's really cool that TST has install videos for all of their parts, but that's all they have. There are no written instructions, no wiring diagrams anywhere, and their videos are very in-depth. The install video of this is 36 minutes long with no chapters included, so when it came to the wiring portion, as opposed to just looking at a wiring diagram and know exactly what I'm plugging in where, I had to sort through a video until I found him, talk about the wires, and then I could figure it out.
We'll need to figure out which side's which. Let's go brown to blue first and green to orange. Let's see, I got these right.
And another weird thing is that TST Industries uses green wires for their power, but Honda uses green wires for their ground.
These are TST Industries signals. They do have a different color code,
which I get is out of TST's control. However, if this is an XR150 specific part and they've already made everything easy with the butt connectors and all of that, I feel like they could have just taken it a step further and made green match green. For somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, it could get very confusing having, like, I think 6 to 8 different butt connectors down there and having to remember that green does not match green. Especially without a wiring diagram, it could get very confusing. So overall, I feel like the process of installing it, all of that leaves a lot to be desired, but the finished product does not. I think it looks absolutely great. I understand why these bikes need a big fender from the factory, especially because the first ride that I went on, it's flinging water up on me. But damn, does that look so good. It was worth the headache and the sketchiness of having to cut it and all that. And the last thing that we did back here is going along with this new tail light, we actually put in a strobe module, meaning that now when you hit the brakes, instead of the tail light just illuminating solid red, there are several different ways that you can get it to flash to alert the driver behind you so that you're more visible. It comes programmed out of the box for kind of like a strobe hold, strobe, hold, but it is programmable. Different strobe patterns, a bunch of different stuff. It's really cool, and it's super easy. It's just a module that plugs in line of the taillight plug. Install does not get much easier. The only downside is that there's not a whole lot of room to work with in this tail section, and that module is big enough that I couldn't get the white part of it to sit flat with that module in there. I think partially that has to do with the fact that I couldn't move everything around in there like I should be able to, because I had to solder the wires instead of the bullet connectors. It made the wires a little bit shorter, so it's hard to move stuff around, but it ended up working out great because I found a way to route that module into underneath the seat. I just have it zip tied in under there, and now that module is accessible by just taking the seat off for if and when I want to reprogram the flash rate. Super cool feature. I really dig that, especially for how easy it is to install. And now the finished product is looking sexier than I could have hoped for, with the LED headlight, the flush mount LED turn signals, and of course the best part is that gigantic stock fender is gone, no matter how iffy the process was. It just looks so damn good. Leave a comment below and let me know what side of the controversy you fall on. Are you team budget friendly and like the way that it was done now, saving money although you have to hack it up a little bit more? Or are you team beginner friendly and you would spend the extra money for something that was a lot easier? Shout out to the Patreon members for making all of this possible, especially over winter when I can't ride or film for months. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Love you guys. Peace.